coming up, out of control.
Whoa. You just put...
Taxi drivers taking their passengers for a frightening ride.
Would you get a cab?
Oh, gosh, no.
Dirty dealing and fraud
Disabled Australians treated like cash cows.
Absolutely.
that has to be seen to be believed.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every driver we have is an angel.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
Along with politicians, real estate agents and, yes, journalists, taxi drivers are much criticised. Like those employed in the other professions, though, more cabbies are honest and hard-working than not. But the ratbags in the industry take rorting to a new level. And it's not just the drivers. Documents leaked to 60 Minutes, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald revealed that the biggest taxi company in the nation is not only aware of the appalling behaviour, it enables it. This year-long investigation begins with a very common scene, an argument between a taxi driver and a passenger over a fare. And in this case, the person being ripped off in the cab is me. The journey from Spencer Street in Melbourne's CBD to the airport is just over 21 kilometres and takes about 25 minutes outside of peak hour. It's a trip I take frequently, so I have a better sense than most when the fare seems excessive.
Back to airport, brother. Back.
And about 12 months ago, I encountered a driver that seemed prepared to charge me a bit extra.
It just seems a bit higher than normally. It is $73.
Yeah.
It normally costs me about $50 from the air.
No, brother, no 50.
On that day, there was no traffic or any other significant delay. It could explain an increase in the usual fare. This inflated price appeared to be an attempt by the driver to make a quick buck.
Just explain to me, why is the pickup hotel?
Brother, pick up in the front of hotel. Just a pick up straight.
Will you pick me up at the station? Southern
Yeah,
Cross
brother,
Station?
this station, decision not...
Most busy passengers wouldn't bother arguing with their driver. But at the time of my encounter, I'd begun the investigation that led to tonight's program, and I suspected he'd tweaked his terminal to rip me off. And as I pushed the point, he offered to return the $20 he'd overcharged me.
No problem, you pay the $20, I back you $20. No problem.
I don't want your money.
The driver knew the ruse was up. Not only was he trying to hand back money, it was obvious the receipt he'd generated was also inaccurate.
Brother, you wanna go, you wanna go.
Why you give me...
When I questioned him, he turned aggressive.
Brother, this is a $77.90.
So why you give me $20 back?
You asking me $50. Excuse me.
Hey. Excuse me, you can't do that. You cannot do that. Excuse me, do not assault me.
Brother, you wasting my time.
No, you've ripped me off here and you just assaulted me then, okay?
And he didn't stop there, driving off from the airport with me still in the car.
Just pulled off with you.
Going to home.
Okay. Just let me out here. You're now kidnapping me, all right?
No kidnapping, brother. I'm going this side.
Hey, you've ripped me off. You've struck me.
Yeah, you check my ID, brother. You check my ID. Yeah.
After driving me around the block at the airport, the driver let me out. But my experience is repeated far too often in taxis around the country. Most of us simply shrug our shoulders and cop it. But this story isn't about a few dodgy cabbies trying to make an easy buck. It goes far deeper than that. Tonight, we're going to reveal allegations of major corporate wrongdoing involving Australia's largest taxi company. It's called A2B, and it owns the biggest brands in the industry, including 13 Cabs, Silver Service and CabCharge. We've been leaked a trove of confidential documents that detail how A2B isn't just aware that drivers are repeatedly rorting passengers, it's actually enabling them.
Certain staff inside A2B complained over and over again about criminal drivers getting away with it but were ignored.
The person you're hearing from shouldn't be talking to us. They work at A2B, and they could be sacked if their identity is made public. But they're so incensed by what is unfolding within the company, they feel the need to speak out.
The CabCharge system is being rorted. There's rorting in 13 Cabs and Silver Service. The terminals customers use to pay with credit cards and cab charges are being exploited. Cash payments are being defrauded. It's everywhere. It's endemic, but it's mostly covered up or papered over.
To protect our whistleblower, we've recreated their interview, but these are their words.
A to B is not only known about how easy it is to defraud customers, it's designed a system that made it easy to commit the fraud and then looked the other way when the inevitable happened and the fraud became systemic.
This employee says drivers are exploiting gaping holes in A to B's taxi products. Here's two ways this happens. The first is through the payment terminals inside the cabs, which drivers routinely override. The second is through the cab charge payment system. To show the extent of the fraudulent activity, we decided to put A to B's products and the drivers that use them to the test. It's lunchtime on a Thursday in Melbourne, and a vulnerable-looking passenger approaches the taxi rank. It's hardly an unusual situation.
Are you free?
Where are you going?
But what these drivers don't know is this man is working undercover, armed with cab charges.
Do you take cab charge?
No, bro.
Cab charge?
Posing as a confused elderly man, he's a prime target for unscrupulous taxi drivers. And it doesn't take long for a couple of them to pounce.
Yeah.
Can I have a look?
Yeah.
That's fine, right? Yeah.
This driver takes the cab charge before they even get in the car and immediately turns the meter off when they start driving. 1.5 kilometres and 10 minutes later, the trip is over.
Oh, very close.
And our undercover is handed a receipt for $54.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now that in itself is an outrageous fare for a short journey. But it's not until the next day the true scale of the scam is revealed, when the driver charges the Channel 9 cab charge account a whopping $325. Graham, you've regulated, overseen this industry. Would you get a cab?
Oh gosh, no. Not unless I was absolutely in a desperate need. And you know, it's happened once in Sydney, but it cost me a lot of money as a result. But no, I wouldn't do it.
As the former head of the Consumer Watchdog and ex-chairman of the Victorian Taxi Commission, it was once Graham Samuel's job to keep an eye on this industry. Now he wants nothing to do with it.
Oh, well, consumers are being ripped off. The public is being ripped off. And what this is revealing is decades of failure, literally decades of failure by successive governments in trying to regulate the industry. But it's just not going to happen. You can't regulate an industry where there are so many thousands of participants in terms of drivers, individual licence holders and big corporates who basically are at a position where they say, if I can get away with rorting the system, why don't I do it?
The problem for many passengers is that the fraud is not immediately obvious, especially when it comes to the way the cab charge payments are processed. But when you know what to look for, it's happening everywhere. A couple of hours after our undercover's first trip, he takes another short journey, this time from Flinders Street Station to Carlton in Melbourne. The 10-minute ride resulted in a $15 fare, or so he thought. The next day, it turned up on the Channel 9 cab charge account as a $174 charge. Are it so easy for drivers to rip off passengers?
Because there's no accountability, there's no transparency. Big corporates are there and they're saying, we'll be complicit in what you're doing by just keeping it quiet and private. But this is what occurs. There's a tacit arrangement between the big operators, the drivers, and that's a feather bed, if you like, for rorting and for avoiding regulation and avoiding consumer accountability. And if the consumer doesn't know, then the consumer can't make an informed choice.
Rorting regular passengers is one thing, but defrauding the most vulnerable in our community is beyond low. And as you're about to see, some A to B linked drivers are doing just that and worse. When you see how they're being treated in the back of that cab, how do you describe that in layman's terms?
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
As a police officer with Victoria's Highway Patrol, leading Senior Constable Tim Schnepf has witnessed some truly terrible things including bad behaviour by cabbies. But nothing could have prepared him for what he encountered during a shift in July 2023.
Myself and one of my colleagues, we were just doing routine road policing, and a 000 call came through.
Any units available to attend to a report of a taxi driver drink driving.
The location was a disability support service centre in Glen Waverley, Melbourne. And all the police officer knew was that a maxi taxi driver had been busted drink driving on the job.
They'd seen a half-drunk bottle of Crown Lager in the driver's door. He smelt of intoxicating liquor, beer. We did the breath test and we got a reading of 0.191, which for a normal full licensed driver is almost 4 times the legal limit. Taxi drivers on duty have a 0 limit, so no alcohol whatsoever. So he's completely well and truly over that limit.
Suspicious of what else the driver had been up to, he accessed the CCTV in the maxi taxi. What the senior constable discovered was more than 300 hours of what can only be described as incredibly distressing footage. It shows driver Jarnail Singh transporting profoundly disabled passengers around Melbourne. Most people would accept it's a job that requires care and compassion. But as you can see, Singh displayed neither of those qualities. In fact, he was nothing but cruel, physically abusing and emotionally taunting his terrified victims.
It was just a consistent theme, day in, day out. He just didn't secure the wheelchairs. He didn't apply the brakes. Multiple assaults. It was just dangerous driving. He was drinking whilst he was driving. He wasn't wearing his own seatbelt. It was just unbelievable.
When you see how they're being treated in the back of that cab, how do you describe that in layman's terms?
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. How can someone treat another human being like this?
When Liam gets into a taxi or an Uber, how vulnerable is he?
He's 100% vulnerable because he cannot communicate in any way if he's being mistreated. If he's being abused or mistreated in any way, he cannot tell anyone he trusts what has happened to him. So he's a sitting duck, really.
Yeah. Look at this. Look at the city.
Sandy Guy's son, Liam, was one of Jarnail Singh's regular passengers and frequent victims. Liam can't talk, but this CCTV, obtained by 60 Minutes, speaks a million words.
He was treated like an animal. Our beloved Liam was treated like an animal. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life.
How many rides did Liam take with this taxi driver?
I know that Singh was driving Liam for at least a year before that, and that is something that causes me just the most terrible trauma, to even think what that man might have done to Liam in that previous year.
How can this be allowed to happen? What are you doing?
It obviously triggers that response from you. What do you say?
I'm getting a bit emotional because I see it. It's a combination of anger and real upset. I mean, how can this be allowed to happen? It's just disgraceful. And I look at the driver there hitting the passenger on the head. You know, I just can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
We showed this vision to the former chairman of the Victorian taxi regulator, Graham Samuel.
The fact that they can get away with that over and over again, what does that say about the state of the system?
It says that the regulators are failing, the regulations are failing, and frankly, governments ought to be ashamed. They've instituted these regulations, they've instituted these regulators. They ought to be ashamed that this is still happening.
Which taxi company was the offender driving for?
The taxi was marked up as 13 Cabs.
Australia's biggest taxi brand.
That's right, yeah.
You'd think, one would presume, that 1-3 cabs would at least have systems that would pick this stuff up.
You'd think so, yep.
But in your mind, they were missing.
Absolutely, yep.
Deeper investigation by the police uncovered a further betrayal. Singh wasn't just physically abusing his passengers, he was also ripping them off over and over again.
How was he defrauding these disabled Victorians?
So he was activating their accounts whilst he had no passengers in the car. He was overcharging them by starting the meter early, or he was not turning the meter off when he was dropping them off and kept the meter running for a significant amount of time after the journey had finished.
How easy was it for this taxi driver to financially rip off these customers?
I think it was too easy.
I believe they targeted people like Liam who simply couldn't tell anyone that they were being ferried all over the place. I mean, I have one docket of Singh's which says Liam was taken from North Dandenong to North Dandenong. I don't think Liam's ever been to North Dandenong. And charged $50 or something. So they obviously absolutely focused on people who they knew could not communicate.
You think people like Liam, disabled Australians, were treated like cash cows?
Absolutely.
Despite initially denying the accusations against him, Jarnail Singh pleaded guilty to 499 offences. In December last year, Sandy and the families of Singh's other victims gathered at Melbourne's Magistrates Court. Singh was fined just $20,000 and avoided jail. The magistrate, however, demanded changes to the law to make it easier to send offenders like Singh to prison.
Had Singh not been pulled over for drink driving in his maxi taxi with a disabled person inside, would he still be offending?
I have no doubt. I think he'd be out there doing what he'd been doing with impunity.
Up next, defending the indefensible.
Are cabbies with 1-3 cabs, Silver Service, your brands, they're engaging in fraud today, aren't they?
In July 2023, Bridget did what many do after a night out dancing with friends. She hopped into a 1-3 cabs vehicle and trusted the driver to ferry her safely home. Hers was a fair assumption, as 1-3 cabs is owned by Australia's biggest taxi firm, A2B, which also owns Cabcharge, Silver Service, and supplies most of the payment terminals in the nation's cabs.
What was the first thing that gave you alarm?
I didn't have alarm until the very end of the car ride. He was just about to turn onto my street.
After paying for her ride, Bridget was sexually propositioned by her driver.
As I reached for the door handle, I saw that he was getting out of the taxi. So when I tried to fully open the door, I couldn't quite fully open the door because he was standing in front of my door.
Blocking your exit?
He was blocking my exit so that I had to maneuver around him to stand up and get out of the taxi.
And what happened next?
As I was trying to exit the taxi and get around him, he said, "So you're gay, I'd love to get in between your legs with another woman."
A terrified Bridget raced to her front door, bursting into tears, before deciding to report the incident, first to 1-3 cabs, who never got back to her, and then to Victoria's taxi regulator and the police. She was told the driver would be suspended pending an inquiry, but many months and many calls later, she still doesn't know if he's back driving.
When I followed up repeatedly asking what the outcome was, I was eventually told that the complaint was closed and my file was closed and I hadn't been notified.
So this taxi driver who sexually harassed you, sexually propositioned you, stood over you, you don't know whether he's driving today?
No, I don't know. And at the end of the process, I feel no safer than at the start because I ultimately don't know if this person is still driving a taxi and whether or not I'll encounter him again.
It's not just passengers who are concerned about the behaviour of A to B linked drivers and the company's response. Some A to B staff are also furious at what they say is a culture of profiteering and impunity that has seen cabbies using A to B products and software to rort tens of thousands of Australians and treat passengers with contempt.
Certain staff inside A to B complained over and over again about criminal drivers getting away with it but were ignored.
The person you're hearing from works for A to B. To protect their identity, we've recreated this interview, but the words are their own.
Well, it's an outright lie that the company is committed to stamping out fraud and dangerous drivers. It's a lie to the public.
These confidential files from inside A to B, we're calling them taxi leaks, back up the claims made by our whistleblower. The files expose how A to B stands accused of enabling rampant fraud inside cabs. At the top of the target list are vulnerable Australians, whose transport is often paid for by you, the taxpayer. This list details the 40 most rorted cab charge customers, and it's a who's who of hospitals, disability and NDIS services, aged care centres and other state and federally funded facilities. It's Australia-wide and it's shocking. Maroondah Hospital in Victoria was ripped off 774 times. Villa Maria Aged and Disability Care 453 times. And the Peter James Aged and Chronic Illness Care Centre in Melbourne was ripped off 342 times. In total, these facilities were scammed around 6,000 times. Then there are stunning individual cases. In Victoria, a cab charge account belonging to an aged care resident was charged 75 times over just a few days, generating $3,000, even though she had died months before. Last May, an NDIS provider in Sydney identified almost 2,000 fraudulent transactions involving 6 disabled clients, including one who was also dead. A to B quietly paid back $67,000, but police weren't notified.
They don't call the police. If a complaint is made, it might be settled quietly. The aim is to keep the problem in-house.
Mid last year, A to B's chief executive Nick Yap was emailed by the company's own fraud investigators, who warned him the company was responsible for years of systemic flaws and significant lapses in fraud detection and prevention, allowing taxi drivers and operators to commit eye-watering fraud and taxpayer-funded abuses running into millions of dollars. You'd think this astonishing level of fraud would be cause for great concern within A to B. But when I sat down with executive David Samuel, he seemed to downplay the situation.
Are cabbies with 13 cabs, Silver Service, your brands, they're engaging in fraud today, aren't they?
We're seeing a low number of complaints comparatively to the rest of the industry, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every driver we have is an angel. We identify those.
Samuel has worked as a senior A to B executive for 10 years, and yet he at first claimed to know little of the rampant rorting his colleagues are so concerned about.
Are you aware that staff within A to B internally have raised complaints recently that fraud involving A to B products, A to B aligned drivers is eye-watering, that management has known about it and not done enough to combat it?
I'm not aware of that, Nick.
A minute later, he changed his tune.
The complaints went to the senior executive. You're a part of that?
Yes, I am.
I just want to know, are you aware of these internal concerns? Has the CEO raised with you the fact that compliance staff have raised really significant concerns about A to B facilitating fraud, enabling fraud, not acting on fraud?
Well, I would challenge the notion we facilitate fraud. I am aware that issues were raised. That's how we become aware of a problem, and then we work to solve that problem.
Can you confirm that some of the most significant fraud involves NDIS clients, disability service providers, elderly, aged care, government-funded hospitals?
No, I can't confirm that, Nick. I don't believe that is where the problem lies.
So you're seriously saying you can't confirm that significant NDIS, disability service providers, aged care facilities have not been ripped off using your products? You can't confirm that. You're not aware of that?
No, I'm saying we don't believe those services are being ripped off.
Let me give you some examples. Maroondah Hospital, 774 times ripped off. The Villa Maria Care Homes, 453 times. Cabs Charge Your Products, ripped off. Peter James Centre, 340 times. This is not dozens, this is hundreds, these are thousands of rip-offs of these sorts of facilities. You're unaware?
No, we're not aware. What I've said, and I'll say again, is we were made aware of those issues, then we looked to fix them. We believe in what we're doing. We want to identify the problems and we want to fix them. We're not going to say we're perfect and that things haven't gone wrong in the past and won't go wrong in the future. But we want to identify those issues and fix them so people can have faith in them.
The former head of the Victorian taxi regulator and the nation's consumer watchdog, Graham Samuel, says A2B can't be trusted.
Graham, what is your impression of the scale and nature of the misconduct we've uncovered?
The scale doesn't surprise me. We've got to remember we've got literally thousands of drivers, and then we have the tacit sort of complicit collaboration, if you like, by big companies that are there, and they could, with technology and with oversight and with transparency, they could stop these sorts of frauds occurring. They just don't do it.
Why not?
I think because they accept that they've got drivers that are there that are basically doing what they want them to do. They've got some very big profits out of the big companies. Yeah, why rock the boat? Let's keep it quiet. We'll see if we can deal with those drivers that are severely wrought in the system, but let's keep it quiet, no transparency. That's got to be the worst thing of all in terms of consumers and consumers being able to make a proper choice.
Hello, I'm Nick McKenzie. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.